This is easily one of the best gaming laptops you can buy today. It's the HP Victus. I paid only $565 and I got an RTX 2050 graphics card, a beautiful 144Hz display, a Ryzen 5 6-core CPU, 16 gigs of RAM, all in a sleek, unassuming package. My last video was a broad overview of the machine, and today we're taking a deeper dive into the performance to see exactly what you can expect from this machine. We will cover benchmarks, thermals, fan noise, gaming, frame rates, and much more. So let's get right into this. Now, the purpose of benchmarking is to give us a picture on how the hardware stacks up against relative peers. I started with a simple disk speed test. This shows if the 512GB M.2 SSD is quality or not. You would expect a true M.2 to have fast read and write speeds around 3,500 megabits per second. And that's exactly what I saw here. And this level of speed on the disk makes general computing much more enjoyable than it otherwise would be. Everyday things like launching games, loading web pages, even boot time. I noticed that this thing boots up faster than my M1 iPad Pro, taking less than 10 seconds. And it's also immediately responsive at that point. You can launch apps right away. Aside from the SSD, a big contributor to this performance is the Ryzen 5 7535HS CPU. So if you Google this chip, the Ryzen 5 7535HS, you're going to get a generic single core score of 1700 and multi of just over 6600. However, the performance is going to vary based off of the machine it's in, the cooling system, and a bunch of other different variables. Cinebench is a great standardized test for this. It renders images, loading various textures over a 10-minute period, and it sees how much your PC can do. We pulled a single core score of 1,312, and the thing I like about this program is it gives you a comprehensive list of comparable hardware. And based off of this list, we can see that the single core is only slightly behind that of the 11th gen Intel Core i7. On multi, we managed a score of 9,037, again, just behind the Intel 8-core i9 CPU. So these are great numbers, and it helps to complete the picture as to why the system overall feels so fast and responsive. Gonna be real, I was expecting a lot worse considering the sub $600 price tag. Now, according to Reddit, for gaming, the CPU does make an impact here. You want something that's modern, so there's no compatibility issues, and you want at least 4 threads. And just generally, you want it to be able to keep up with the GPU, because it is true that the GPU does most of the heavy lifting, rendering the images, but the CPU is what controls and feeds data back and forth to the GPU. So if one is drastically faster than the other, it could create bottlenecks in the system. And based on what I see here, the Ryzen 5 6-core CPU is a great companion and a similarly great performer to the RTX 2050 graphics card that we have inside this machine. And talking more about the GPU, I think it is outstanding. I say that because it can run almost any game on high settings 1080p and deliver 60 FPS. That is an epic achievement for this price point. Before getting too deep into the games though, I did run 3D Mark, which is a gaming benchmark, and it gave us a legendary score of 4,258. Now, the coolest thing about this benchmark is the estimated game performance. So we can click through 5 different popular games and see the estimated frame rate at 1080p Ultra and 1440p Ultra. So at 1080p Ultra, Battlefield 5 is estimated to have about 90 frames per second, Apex Legends, 100 frames per second, GTA 5, 155 frames per second, Red Dead Redemption, which is more demanding, 50 plus, and then finally Fortnite, an easier game, about 200. Now, in addition to the benchmark, I did run a stress test just to confirm that the high frame rate is sustainable, so it's not going to dip after like 20 minutes. And luckily, the results are extremely promising. You can see we did 20 runs of a graphically intense simulation, and the frame rate up here is consistent between every single run. Even the temperature, it got up to 67 degrees Celsius and maintained that the entire test, clearly indicating that there is no thermal throttling with this laptop. Getting into the gameplay, I tested a variety, including Fallout 4, Rocket League, Overwatch 2, Counter-Strike, and The Witcher 3. Just in case you didn't watch my last video, in person, I gotta say these games all look fantastic due to the nice colors and viewing angles on this pretty high quality 1080p IPS panel. So there's no need to worry about the screen being trash or low quality. To the contrary, the screen here is a major selling point due to the fast refresh rate at 144 Hz. This means you can actually see and enjoy frame rates above 60. So keep this in mind as we talk about the frame rates. Okay, the latest game I played is Rocket League. I had it set to 1080p, highest settings, and I was easily pulling 200 FPS. And the game looked flawless. There was no screen tearing, stuttering, artifacts. And as we saw in the stress test, thermals and potential throttling is not an issue on this laptop. The next game I booted up is Counter-Strike. This is another light game that most systems can handle just fine. But I gotta say, at 1080p max quality, the game looked really fantastic on this screen. Lots of fine details, the lighting, the refractions. I just thought it looked really good, and I was pulling a consistent 100 plus FPS. And a game like this that's a competitive first-person shooter, it's very twitchy, reaction-based, this is where the fast 144 Hz display really shines through. I used to play this game a lot on a custom-built absolute beast of a PC at 4K resolutions, but I was limited to a 60 Hz display. And I can tell you right now, I much prefer this experience at 1080p 144 Hz versus 4K 60 Hz. Again, it's just one of those games that the speed is crucial. Overwatch 2 is my current jam, and there's a bit more going on here visually, lots of lighting, refractions, utilizing ray tracing cores. And here I have it set to 1080p Ultra, the highest quality at this resolution, and I'm seeing a consistent 100 frames per second. The lowest I've seen while gaming is the mid-90s, and the highest is well over 120. And this is another one of those competitive first-person shooter games where reaction time is key, and you want to make sure you can both render a lot of frames and properly see all of them. And this laptop can do both of those very important things. Now, being that this is my current jam, I played this game for hours at a time on this machine, and I can confirm beyond the benchmark that there is no slowdown chugging as a result of overheating. This laptop can maintain this level of performance indefinitely. All right, moving on to something more heavy. This is The Witcher 3. And for a game like this, I'm happy with 60 frames per second, and you generally want the graphics to look as good as possible to maximally enjoy the game. So here I tested out 1080p high with ray tracing, and that left me at 30 frames per second. Completely playable for this kind of game, but if you disable the ray tracing and you leave everything else at high settings, then you get a clean 60 FPS. The game still looks good, however, not fantastic. So I would say if you're a big fan of games like this, and you're a stickler for quality, you might be better off going for something more expensive that can handle 4K high settings. I mean, after all, a budget laptop can only do so much. And finally, I downloaded Fallout 4. This is a similarly difficult game, graphically speaking, and it got about 47 frames per second in 1080p high with anti-aliasing. This can be boosted to 60 frames if you disable anti-aliasing. I do want to point out that while running games, the fans obviously spin on, but they never went into maximum overdrive. It stayed below 40 decibels. To translate that into something you guys can actually relate to, if you game with headphones on like myself, the fan noise is not noticeable. So to give you guys my final thoughts on the HP Victus 15-inch gaming laptop, in case it's not obvious, I think this is a no-brainer if you're looking for performance on a budget. It's $565. You have that fast display. Don't forget about that. That's like one of my favorite aspects of this laptop. The 144 Hz refresh rate on a good-looking IPS panel, a modern RTX 2050, a 6-core Ryzen 5 7535HS CPU, and 16 gigabytes of RAM. I think the only people that shouldn't buy this laptop are those that don't game and they want something thin, light, and portable. For those people, they should buy a MacBook, but for everybody else, this is a fantastic choice in my opinion. And I'll go ahead and leave the exact Amazon listing I purchased from below the video. And with all that said, that's the end. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.